Welcome all to the Evoke Cast. I'm here with Ethan and Seb, two of the three guys. Martine, who is the third, who this summer climbed a route on a mountain in the Karakoram, Ultar. Um, yeah, I, Seth Keena, um, consulted to these fellows about their training for this objective. These two guys had done quite a bit of training for this objective, played a small role, um, as well as the other factors that we'll hear about, and yeah, to get them to the summit. So we're fortunate enough that they took some time out of their days to talk with us. So welcome you two.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks for having.
So can you talk about the kind of the place, kind of where zoom out, what region, as I said, it's in Pakistan, but give us the local kind of names and valleys and to get us to where you guys were.
I want to pass that one off to
Yeah,
my
sure.
liaison officer.
So I'm Ethan. And yeah, I can get into the details there. So Ultar Sar sits in the western Karakoram. It is directly above the Hunza Valley. So when you think about climbing in Pakistan, there's generally two major regions you think about. The central Karakoram, which is near Skardu, which is where the 8,000-meter peaks, K2 and Broad Peak, the Gasherbrums, the Lataks, those kind of mountains are in the central Karakoram. And then if you drive a few hours west of there, you get into the Hunza Valley, which is where there are a lot of big 7,000-meter peaks like Rakaposhi, um, Diran, Ultar, um, Baturasar, Muchu Chish, these kinds of other mountains. And the Western Karakoram was opened up a lot earlier because of the conflict between India and Pakistan. So a lot of these mountains were climbed earlier than some of the peaks that you hear about in the Central Karakoram, like Linksar. And so Ultar had been climbed, I think, in the early 90s. Is that right, Seb? You remember?
Yeah, I think so.
And it was
92
actually
maybe.
climbed quite late for a 7,000-meter peak. Um, it was at one time considered the highest peak in the world when science was vague.
Highest unclimbed
And
peak.
highest unclimbed peak in Pakistan, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh, okay.
yeah. Or in the world, I think they
But it
thought it was
wasn't.
the
It
highest
wasn't.
unclimbed
It was
peak.
just, yeah, it just was
Do you know
considered.
the story about why it was thought to be that? Was it a measurement error or was it bureaucratic thing, or do you
Well,
know?
for a while there, I think it was a measurement error, and then the peak was also only allowed to be attempted by Pakistanis because they wanted to make the claim of having climbed the highest unclimbed peak in the world at that time. And then, I mean, up until last year, Muchu Achish, which is arguably very close by, was the highest unclimbed peak in the world. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I mean, in that era, they were way off. More recently, it
Yeah,
was a little closer, but still not that close.
Yeah.
interesting.
And so you can see the summit of Ultar right from the town of Karimabad, which is kind of the social and economic hub of the Hunza Valley. And so you can be drinking cappuccinos and eating the local specialty walnut cake and looking at this big, rocky, snowy summit 5,000 meters above you. And so it's actually really close to town geographically. It's like 5,000 meters higher than Karimabad in only 8 kilometers distance. So it's like really steep, intense topography between town and the summit. And so the route that we were looking at, the Southeast Pillar, it's kind of a known objective. It's been tried many times over the last few decades, um, on some occasions by multiple attempts for the same team.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, it was just something that I think when you see a photo of it, it really catches your eye. It's 7,388 meters, and the pillar rises about 3,100 meters from the Bergschrund to the summit, so it's quite the undertaking, and it's also known as the hidden pillar because it's just tucked away in this cirque. That's just you really just can't see the whole thing unless you're standing pretty much
Right.
under it.
So when you're in town, you are seeing what aspect and what aspect and how does that aspect relate to the hidden pillar?
You can see the mostly the west face, I would say, but
Okay.
in that you can see the pillar in profile on the upper flanks and sort of what
Okay.
would be the finishing summit slopes.
Okay.
So it gives you a bit of an idea, but you're looking at the west face, which is the side that was climbed by the Japanese team that made the first ascent of the mountain up
Okay.
what they call Ultar Meadow, just above town.
I see. So West Face first ascent Japanese, uh, approximately what year?
I believe 92 or maybe 94, but yeah, kind of a normal mountaineering route, and that's kind of a really beautiful cirque up there. That kind of hosts a bunch of different peaks. There's Boho Jangur, which is kind of the neighboring summit, and then quite famous and striking features like Hunza Peak and Ladyfinger, which are these big sort of granite towers.
Nice.
One of which got climbed this year by a Czech team. But yeah, so it's kind of like the next circle over from where we were, you would say.
And then subsequent attempts on the hidden pillar. Just a brief overview. Who was over there trying it, if you guys know?
The person I'm not going to leave out because he was left out of the Explorer web reports and stuff is Victor Saunders. I think.
Okay.
So we're going to mention
Why
him
was
first. But
you're right?
well, yeah, he did a lot of early exploration in that area. Actually, it's been cool reading his books on trips over there and hearing about the way the Hunza was back in the day.
Okay.
But the Giri boys, so super strong Japanese team of alpinists. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to understate how much
Right.
cool climbing they did. And then Colin Haley, I think, had a crack.
Jed Brown,
Uh,
we went together.
yeah, with Jed Brown.
And
Yannick
then,
Graziani made 2 attempts.
yeah, one with
With just,
Christian Traumsdorf and some other Frenchmen, I think.
and then
For that.
Bruce Norman also made a
Oh,
trip
okay.
too. Yeah, and those guys unfortunately had an accident kind of halfway up the pillar. But yeah, those are sort of the history, the attempts that we know of anyway.
And these attempts were in what style? Traditional siege tactics or capsule or alpine style.
I believe they were all alpine style attempts. Yeah, from
Okay.
what I gathered and from what we saw on the mountain, it was quite clean. We found a couple ropes here and there, but yeah, the Giri boys kind of had the high point, and they had actually climbed up into the upper pillar, the mixed and rock sort of section, which is kind of the what you would expect to be the crux when you're looking at the rig, um, and bailed in bad weather.
Yeah,
And it
I'm
seems
not
like
sure if they I'm not sure if they quite made it to the rock because I think initially I thought that they had because their high point was like 6,500 or something like that. But then when we got to 6,500 where we thought the rock was going to start, we were definitely not there yet.
right, yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah, I think that either way they kind of got highest on the mountain, and it seems like the other teams probably got turned around. There's kind of a halfway point, one of the only flat areas on the rig, and around 6,000 meters. And it seems like, yeah, aside from the Giri boys, that was most people's high point, including ours last year.
Yeah. So this is the second time you guys have been to this mountain, and all three of you, or just the two?
All three of us with Martin. Yeah,
Okay.
we tried last year, and
Right.
I don't know if you want us to go into it, but for because of a multitude of factors, we also had a high point at around 6,000 meters,
Okay.
and we decided to go back this year. Yeah.
I mean, I think the factors, not that I'm asking you to go into them, but I think as our listeners will hear and that we all keep in our minds when we're engaging with these things, it's like the multitude of factors is this is really the theme of failure, success, and it's humbling take a step back and view those. And maybe it's part of the intrigue why we do this kind of thing, to sort of adjust those and align those factors as best we can. Yeah.
Totally. I was actually thinking about like the value of training before our chat today, and I realized that it's kind of one of the only factors you have control over on a trip like this.
Oh, okay.
You know, like when you consider all the elements of a trip, and obviously you're trying to nail the right conditions and time of year and things like that. Training kind of is one of the main ones that you can really tip in your favor. And, you know, if you've only got control over 10%, then you kind of want to make sure you nail that 10% or do as best as you can within that. So, but basically last year,
Yeah, that and you know, mapping out the approach route to base camp so that when you're leading a train of 20 porters carrying 50 pounds each, you're not on-siting the glacier as we found out the first year and trying to like
Yeah.
figure out where the camps are going to be along the route as you're going. Like, oh, is there going to be water around that corner? How many more hours can we go? We have no idea where we are.
Yeah, I tell
totally.
it because I want everyone to know, like, what do you mean porters? Like, so you three, we're going to last year, your attempt. You're going in there. It's not just you guys with backpacks and some duffel bags in your hands, right? There's some other folks. So, um,
I feel like
hey,
we need to describe that entire mission because you are trying to climb a 7,000 meter peak, right?
okay.
7,400 in this case, or almost. And you generally want to acclimatize to within 1,000 meters of that. So you need to get to 6,400. And on Ultar, we decided that that was going to be way too complex because it's too steep and technical, and it's not practical to go up and down the mountain,
So
right?
you can't acclimatize on Ultar is the decision that you came to.
Exactly. And so then the expedition takes on a new nature of complication because we're now going to two valleys.
Because we also realized that we couldn't acclimatize anywhere near Ultar because it's all so steep and seract and gnarly, except for the one line. And so
Ah,
we had also got tipped off again from Bruce, who had done a similar thing, that it might be advantageous to go somewhere where it would be easier to acclimatize, aka like walk up a south-facing snow slope, instead of trying to climb all this technical ground. And he had done the same thing when he went in 2018.
Yeah. And so basically, logistically, that complicates things. There are valleys that are visited a couple times this summer. I mean, Ultar hadn't been visited at that point for a few years, but the valley we ended up going to was the Muchuar, um, which hosts a number of really cool peaks and Shispar, Bachura, Sangamamar, and others. But our main objective was Batokshi, a 6,000 meter bump, and from there you can kind of head up the slopes of Bachura. But what I mean to get to is the fact that so we got to establish two base camps in two valleys that are pretty rarely visited, and so you want to spend 2 or 3 weeks in these places so you can go up and down and acclimatize and recover in between. You're not going to be able to carry stuff to hike 4 days up a valley and feed yourself for 3 weeks. And so then it takes on the additional logistical challenge of taking a bunch of porters up there so you can actually establish a camp out of which you can recover and acclimatize. So the porters aren't climbing with us at all. We're just going to base camp with them. And then from there, you have your base camp established with a cook and an assistant cook. And then it was just the three of us going up and down the mountain. And then we
all
obviously
right.
have to pull everything out of that valley, undo the whole porter uh, parade, and then repeat it up at Ultar Base Camp. So that was a huge logistical challenge because quite often they're just local guys from the villages, like literally where the glacier runs down valley. There's usually a town because they use that glacial runoff to water, you know,
Irrigate.
exactly irrigate. They're all farmers, so basically each like valley head has a small population of people that live there, and so whichever mountain you're climbing, kind of the local guys or the guys that are going to work are the people who feel connected to that mountain and work in that area and live at the base. So they might not have carried loads for 5 or 6 years, you know. So it's a whole thing of keeping everyone psyched and also, trying to make it fair and safe and trying to figure out where you want base camp. And so those are the kind of challenges we were dealing with last year from a logistical standpoint.
Because you were on-siting, or you had very little information about how to get to your acclimatization valley and into the Ultar Sar Valley or the Hidden Pillar Valley.
Well, we kind of knew like the general place we were going, which valley we were going up, the general area we wanted base camp. But I think in this day and age where we rely a lot more on someone local to be organizing logistics and permits and things like that. In our case, Gafur from Pakistan Higher Ground Expeditions, who is an amazing human, a good friend, and has kind of is kind of infamous in the American climbing community just because he's worked with so many and spent time with so many American alpinists. Um, and so it's kind of easy when you're organizing to be like, hey, these guys, him or one of the guides or the porter leader, like they'll know where to go, right? It's like it's their valley. They know what's happening. And so I think I learned the lesson there that I was just kind of a little bit too reliant on the local knowledge and didn't devise enough of a strategy ahead of time. Like, okay, today we're going to walk this far to this camp. Tomorrow we're going to walk this far to this camp. Sit down with the guys with a map and kind of make a daily plan. Which even the second time it's hard to do just because it's Pakistan and things don't tend to go according to plan. But having
Okay.
a little bit more of an idea, I think, is definitely helpful when you're out there and trying to devise an approach. And you're essentially just walking up uh, rubble covered glaciers half the time, and so there's a lot of up and down, and it's really difficult, uncomfortable walking with heavy bags for these guys. And so it's like we thought that, hey, these guys, some of these guys we brought over from Skardu, and we're like, hey, they go up to K2 every year, all year. They're super fit. They like know what the drill is. But we actually found that the terrain, once you're off the quote unquote beaten path, is actually much more difficult, and they had a really hard time. It was much harder work than they were used to. So when you're paying someone or telling them that they're going to do the same amount of work that they're used to, and then it's twice as hard, that's generally where you run into run into issues.
That is a issue for sure. Interesting. Right. So,
I
all
think part
right, we
of
could go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, as complicated as it all sounds, I think part of all of this is the allure of climbing like a unclimbed face, right? Like there's no established camps. It's not like, the adventure starts like in town, kind of, and that's cool in a way because it's a challenge and just getting to the mountain can be quite tricky and positioning yourself in the right spot and everything. And I mean, that's kind of why it was cool to return to because you work on the knowledge that you gained from the first trip. So I feel like from our first trip, we came away with so much information. First time in the range, first time understanding the snowpack there and how the seasons work and kind of, different things from where you want base camp to what time of day you're climbing to, um, you know, every little aspect you can improve on. And I think we pretty quickly decided we wanted to go back because it was like, well, it'd be kind of a shame not to apply all these things we've learned to having a real proper go at it and trying to do it right.
Yeah, so combined with, the usual things, weather conditions, like health, fitness, like there was a lot of that logistical stuff that made up a big portion of the multitude of factors of why we retreated, and we're also psyched to go back the next year.
Right. And that's so interesting about this sort of these trips, these expeditions, is that the major challenge elements or the factors working against you also seem to attract you three to this to do it again, to show back up.
Totally. I think alpinism in a sense is kind of like a culmination of lots of different disciplines of climbing, right? It's kind of got to have strong legs to walk uphill. You got to be all right on your tools. You got to be able to rock climb. You got to be able to place gear, maybe aid climb if it comes to it, or
Right.
whatever it is. And adventure climbing, like these kinds of adventurous expeditions, is a culmination of lots of other things too, you know. And it's fun when you've got to draw on experience from like lots of different things, you know. Sometimes it's experience at altitude, sometimes it's experience just navigating glaciers, sometimes it's experience socially dealing with porters and how to motivate them and how to be fair,
Sure.
and you know, and it's just it's everything, and that's kind of cool, and it makes it so magic when it all comes together, right? It's just like this Hail Mary thing of so many factors, and when they all align, it's so cool.
Yeah. And other ranges, other places like Patagonia or Alaska, we can agree they have some of these factors, maybe not all of them. Um, they're like what it's like a just for our listeners, like for Alaska, for example, you're usually not dealing with porters, right? So like Pakistan is really it kind of is one of the more unique climbing arenas where you have access to porters, but that can be a help, obviously, because of the scale of the terrain and very little helicopter, zero helicopter assistance or planes landing on these glaciers. Getting your stuff to the base is, or even close to it is often, muscle powered, but it like you're saying, it can be a challenge.
I think that it was curious because for me it was my first time in sort of high altitude greater ranges, and I'd always wondered climbing a lot in Patagonia, like what's the allure, you know, like what's the need to add altitude when you can just climb really hard technical terrain at lower altitude and not deal with a headache. But I then realized on our first trip that when the mountain gets bigger, all of these other things exponentially grow, these other challenges. And so, yeah, I would have loved to have gone alpine style from town on Ultar, but it like what I mean to say is like with a 40-liter backpack, but it's almost because of the altitude to which you need to acclimatize, which is already a multi-day affair, and then the length of the climb and everything gains a larger proportional aspect, and therefore you do need to stock a base camp with porters to then be able to complete a 3-week process of acclimatization, et cetera, if that makes sense. So, but I mean, I think, yeah, I can speak to Patagonia in that sense. Ethan, you might,
But the
yeah.
funny thing is, Ultar is one of those peaks that you like literally could go what we were jokingly calling hotel style, like staying at the hotel in Karimabad, and you literally could leave there and walk up to Ultar in a very long day or two if you really wanted to. But yeah, I mean the analogy with Alaska is essentially like if you landed in Anchorage and drove to Talkeetna and got to the end of the road, and then you're like, hey, all right, we're going to climb Denali. Like, what are we gonna do? Probably need some help. Whether that be an airplane with skis on it or just like a lot of people to help you shuttle your stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
It's also worth mentioning that in terms of performance, like relating to training, that base camp is kind of important. And I know I talked a bunch to Steve Swenson about this before our trip, and one of his main recommendations was to get base camp as close and in as optimal a place as you can to your objective, because that's where you recover. That's where you kind of get it all back between acclimatization rounds, between attempts. And it makes a huge difference. So last year we actually had both our acclimatization base camp and Ultar base camp were a day away from the objective, you know. So that means that each time we went to acclimatize, you can add at least a half a day on each end, which is another X amount of kilometers of glacier terrain, which means another day of good weather that you need, which means another day of rest that you need in between. So everything takes on this, like I said, kind of
Sure.
exponential nature where if you can come down quick, and this year we kind of got our acclimatization camp in a really good spot at basically the toe of the glacier, and it was like from base camp eating amazing food with our awesome cook Usman, we're like right into the glacier and right into the meat and potatoes work of acclimatizing. That's not that fun. But as soon as we're off, we're resting and recovering and putting it all back on.
Right. So another factor was positioning base camp on this trip.
Yes. I mean, last year is funny. Ultar's famous for having this, what we nicknamed the sketchy traverse, which is like this heinous traverse across these like steep rock gullies that are just kind of eternally falling apart, to get even into the circle Ultar is. So you actually, previous teams sometimes have marched in there with porters somehow. Last year we went up and had a look and then decided that we were going to fix a bunch of rope because the porters told us that they could definitely get in there. And we said, well, the only way we're comfortable doing this is fixing basically the whole thing with a hand line. We're going to get a bunch of helmets from construction helmets and put them on these guys. And so we spent a couple of days doing all this work, because it was quite gnarly terrain. But it was going to put our base camp in the Ultar Cirque, and the local guys said they'd done it before with previous expeditions, and so we were kind of amped on this idea. And it was funny. We finally get up there with our whole crew of porters, and they literally took one look over the ridge and dropped their loads. So we put all this work in fixing ropes and trying to figure out this thing and basically trying to guide it. And it turned out that the most sensible thing was actually to have base camp further away and just do that sketchy traverse every time we had to have a crack at Ultar. So it wasn't necessarily always about having it as close as you can. It's just about having it at the smartest place that you can, I guess.
Remarkable. You guys probably go on and on about this kind of stuff. I wanna talk to you guys about, a little bit of your background, who you are. Can one of you introduce Martin and just kind of give him, just so our listeners kind of know this third member here. He's working today, guiding, correct?
He is guiding, yep.
Seb Kenny's better at ragging on him than I am.
Martin, we effectively call him the fish. He's
Fish. How
Yeah.
did he get this name?
I think it was some French Canadian lost in translation. But basically they were trying to call him the herring because his last name is Van Haren.
The cod. He became the
Yeah,
cod
and then it
after that.
became the cod and then the fish. But anyway, he's an enigma. He's an alpine guide, so he works here in Canada. Yeah, taking guests on all kinds of cool climbs throughout the Rockies. He's kind of the guy you call if you want to climb some really cool ice and mixed terrain. And I mean, you guys have done a few trips together.
Yeah, I guess like our history goes quite far back. Like I think Martin and I were both in Canmore around the same time, like in 2018, 2019, and kind of cutting our teeth a bit and really psyched to push into the bigger mountains. And so we formed like a really strong partnership. And I think this was like our fifth expedition in 5 years, I think, that we've been on together. So we've been like super consistent. We went to Logan, um, Nepal, India, and then 2 trips to Pakistan now. So we've kind of been climbing quite a lot together and formed a strong partnership, which has been awesome. It's been super rewarding to like be able to go climb with the same guy, same crew,
Mm,
into the big mountains year after year and have that kind of consistency.
mm,
And so Martin and I had actually just gotten back from a trip to India, with another friend of ours, Alec Berg. That was a complete disaster. There was like a natural disaster, a flood, a glacial lake outburst flood that just like derailed the trip essentially as soon as we got to base camp. So when we got back to Canmore, we were both still feeling pretty hungry and came up with the plan to go to Ultar. And Seba and I had been climbing quite a lot together the last few years. We met in Squamish in the summer, and we just like hit it off immediately. And I invited Seb to join us, me and another friend, Mateo, in the Waddington Range. And we did a traverse. We attempted a bigger traverse in there. And yeah, it was just kind of like when we were thinking about who would be a good third to come with us. Seba was the person who immediately came to mind, and as I somewhat expected. As soon as I proposed it to him, he was instantly like, "Yeah, I'm in. Let's go." So
Nice.
so so that was really well, and I think the team dynamic worked really well. I think Martin and I can sometimes be a little bit in our heads and kind of overthinking things a bit, and I think Seb is very psyched and motivated and kind of like practical in some ways, and would always set the alarm an hour earlier than whatever time we decided on. So he just kind of like keep keep things rolling in a good way and brought a lot of energy. And yeah, I think the team, we all agree the team worked out really well.
Wonderful. And so my history with you, Ethan, is definitely traces back into some time. I met you in Canmore, probably at Steve Swenson. Steve Swenson, for anyone who doesn't know, listening, is an American alpinist, um, who, in one word, is a legend, and also extremely generous with his time and information. Steve is now 71 years old and still out there rock climbing and mountaineering, and he's a wonderful person. Um, so Ethan, but what I wanted to get to was that we spoke more specifically about training around the time that you had a procedure in your shoulder. And can you just talk about a little bit about that? Kind of your history with the shoulder.
Yeah, I'll go just like a little bit further back and briefly, like I grew up in New England, and also my parents worked internationally, and I went to high school in India, and I was born in Delhi. And so I kind of like, I was always active and athletic, but I didn't grow up climbing, or I grew up skiing and snowboarding at the hill in Vermont. And going camping and backpacking, canoeing a bit. And in high school, I played basketball, and yeah, did some sports, but it was never anything like really intense. And then when I graduated from college was when I got into climbing really, and kind of like immediately just got psyched, as so many do, and went really hard for a few years, like in my mid 20s. I was living in Thailand for a few years, climbing in Chiang Mai, mostly sport climbing on limestone, and then came back to the US and went on a kind of rite of passage road trip throughout the West, having never been out to like California or Utah, Nevada, all the classic spots. And I spent that summer living in Yosemite, living in Tuolumne, climbing every day as you do, which was incredible. And by the end of that summer, I couldn't raise my arm above my head. And so it was really like my shoulder injury goes back to really when I started climbing. I think that was 2016 that I really hurt it for the first
Mm.
time. And I think a big part of that was not having the kind of structured athletic background to know how to deal with it. Whereas I had never like done any kind of methodical training. I had never like worked with a proper physio or anything like that. And although I started doing those things because I knew that I had this rotator cuff tear in my shoulder, it took me a few years to find the right person who kind of knew what the right protocol would be to um, to rehab that injury, because I was seeing people who didn't work with climbers or who didn't work with athletes and things like that. And so I wasn't really strengthening my shoulder to the point that it needed to be for rock and mixed climbing. And so I think at a certain point it was just too little too late, and my supraspinatus tendon, one of the four rotator cuff tendons, was just fraying year after year. And it was actually in the middle of our Pakistan trip in 2024 that I properly tore the tendon to the point of needing surgery, just
Wow.
falling while hiking and catching my arm. I just think it was just so weak at that point. And it was like, I could still get up water ice 4, and we finished out the expedition. But when I got back that summer, it was just immediately obvious to the sports doc that I needed to go in and get that tendon repaired. So that was August 2024. And I kind of, Seth, we'd been chatting about training and things like that and going climbing in the Rockies for a while. And I kind of joked with these guys that, oh, like, this is funny because now I'm getting this surgery and it's actually going to be the best thing for our attempt next year because I'm actually going to train instead of just going climbing. And it's like kind of ironic and it's kind of true, right? And so
Right.
I
For
just
sure.
knew that that was my opportunity to kind of go through that cycle, knowing that, hey, like I got into a point where I felt like my technical climbing was good enough and that I could rely on it enough that I didn't really need to focus on that, even
Right.
after recovering my shoulder. And the places I could really improve were my leg strength and my cardiovascular endurance. And so that's kind of how that all started. And it wasn't that I
Yeah,
never wanted to train. It was just that I felt like I had so much to gain just by going and doing the thing, just because I hadn't felt like I'd reached that kind of point where I needed it, and I also just had so much skill to gain just from climbing and getting better at climbing.
totally. Right, because you knew, that maybe you hadn't engaged with formalized training before, but you knew that the real training is going to demand the sacrifice of doing the thing in order to stay engaged with the progressive, consistent um, workouts that are specifically targeting some physiological aspect of you, right? So, so yeah, we like I recall you coming to me specifically about training and saying, yeah, like I'm going through this procedure with my shoulder, and I do think it's a great time to, capitalize on the ability to still move my legs, still have this great lower body functionality, and looking at that as like an opportunity. So, you were in your you got the surgery and were rehabbing in Canmore, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So, right, I think yeah, you had the surgery. What you, and then we worked together for about, what was it, 7 or 8 months
yeah,
since
7 or 8
from
months.
surgery to when you left. Yeah, and initially, for me as a coach, because you hadn't, you like you said, you hadn't done any formalized resistance training, any kind of strength training for your legs, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And your feedback from the year prior about Ultar was you felt quite good, but you noticed some areas that you at least thought you could improve, and they were mostly concerning the cardiovascular system and then your leg strength. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, from where we had gotten halfway up the mountain, um, we had spent 2 big days with, packs for a week of climbing, essentially climbing like lower angle ice faces for 1,500 meters over 2 days. And
Yeah.
so when we had retreated after those 2 days, I could tell that my legs were really tired, and we had a lot of mountain and climbing ahead of us. And so I just remember thinking, like, when we come back next year, I want to wake up and not feel as tired as I do right now in my legs, essentially.
Simply put, and I think it's important for us to essentially pay attention along the way for anything we're doing, if it's going to be, a single pitch rock climb or an ultra run or a alpine climb, of where our weaknesses are. Because like you're saying, you've got this, there's a lot of elements of physical outlay for this event. And it's for sure most efficient to focus on the weak points. And what are those? Well, it's going to take some experience to figure that out. Likely, almost almost across the board, cardiovascular, the aerobic capacity is going to be, uh, the human organism's weakness as they ascend in altitude. It becomes more and more. the culmination or the chief weakness, largely because there's not enough oxygen to really to to recruit musculature to its maximal extent. So, even if you wanted to do a single leg pistol squat up there on the summit, it might, there might not be enough oxygen to really get that many done. Whereas, yeah, moving your legs over and over and over again for the thousands of meters, that's going to be, you're going to need your best mitochondria efficiency to get that done. So, so yeah, so what we did initially, right, was you so let me wind this back one more time. You got the shoulder surgery, so you were basically in a shoulder sling, right? And then your ability to basically work out was largely relegated to machine-based resistance training and some hiking outside, or were you mainly hiking indoors? Like, what were you doing in the first initial sort of like 4 months right after the surgery?
Yeah, well, I was in a sling for 6 weeks, I think, and I think halfway through that or after a month, I started with some of the strength training in the gym. I think the focus was on leg presses and heel raises specifically, because I couldn't
Right.
do any of the kind of like squat or deadlift or those kinds of things, and nothing upper body
Free weight.
free
Right. Any
weight.
kind
So
of
I
free
was
weight
like,
stuff.
I was kind of on the stationary bike a bunch and doing kind of like at an incline on the treadmill. And then
Mhm.
as my shoulder recovered more and more, I was able to start running and hiking outside and eventually ski touring because it was winter in Canmore.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we use the machines ultimately just to get the stimulus, and for Ethan, it's like you couldn't, yeah, like you're saying, you definitely couldn't lift up a barbell, but certainly then you had to be really careful about how you're bearing weight on your back and your shoulders is in that critical period. So, thank goodness for machines. And I think anyone who's looking to have upper body work done or surgery, I've actually worked with another Canmore athlete. She had some upper body surgery. Same thing as in the gym using the machines. It it gets the stimulus, and consequently, with your limitations, right, you had plenty of time to get to the gym and get these workouts done. So,
Totally. And the mental aspect of, working towards next year's objective certainly helped me get through 9 months of shoulder rehab.
yeah. And at the same time, Siba, you were where doing what?
I was in Patagonia doing my regular guiding season down there. I got a little cabin down there, and I
Okay.
spend 2/3 of the year down there. So my scene was totally different to Ethan's.
Right. But
I,
you, yeah, you're working there down there as a guide.
yeah, yeah. So I worked down there as a mountain guide. Specifically, I live in Puerto Natales, so I guide in Torres del Paine and kind of surrounding areas. Also, just throughout the Andes, but that's my kind of base. And then, yeah, so I'm typically doing multiple days a week with guests, and then a bunch of personal climbing and training, and then you're waiting for these ephemeral weather windows, and then when they come, trying to drop the hammer and justify it as training, basically. But we we had a totally different program with Ethan, basically. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so, right. But then, so now after we had a block of gym-based strength, and this was mainly focusing on some of the hypertrophy aspect, but also a lot of the just maximal recruitment, low reps, high amount of weight, what we call max strength, um, which is, as we say in the book and on the website, definitely foundational um, period before we would start period of muscular endurance, which is includes the gym work, but also going out there and doing it. Like probably a lot of what Siba, what you were doing, going out there with some weighted amount of weight in the pack, hiking, either at some pace, but hiking around, getting to an objective or working with your clients and stuff like this. Uh, so yeah, with you, Ethan, we did a gym based muscular endurance workout, and I think Seba, did you participate in that as well at any point?
Yeah, I was
That
definitely doing max strength in the beginning,
yeah,
which I think was super important. I mean, my analysis, it's interesting because Ethan's analysis of the like physical challenges is different, and I think that it's worth considering the mountain, like the what comprises the mountain, to understand how we kind of figured out the training, because it's basically like a long endurance event of 3 days of um kind of moderate but steep enough on the front points and on the tools the whole time, climbing big 600 to 800 meter days, punctuated with some technical pitches in between, but a lot of simul climbing and a lot of like 70-degree ice. And then you're basically need to be recovering and getting enough back that, once you hit 6,800 meters, you're into the steep technical mix climbing um, at that altitude. And yeah, things just getting harder from a technical difficulty standpoint. These are kind of the things we'll think about with training, right? It was like, okay,
right.
so we need to have the endurance to get through these first few days. I think Ethan's point of feeling like the next day you want to ideally recover completely. For me, that was super valuable element of the training. What I almost got the most out of this year, I found, was being able to just go day after day after day. And even in the training cycles, by the end of our training cycles, I could kind of feel that, like doing these weighted carries, big elevation days, and the next day felt fine and I could go again. And it was like, oh, cool. Like we're building not only the ability to carry the stuff up the mountain, but to actually do it the next day and the next day and the next day. And
Yeah,
so there was that aspect. And also for me, it was a lot about, yeah, the strength training was super important. I'd never done any structured strength training like that either. And I spent
right,
heaps of time in zone one, as you do working with guests in
right,
the mountains, long
right,
approaches, yeah, slow pace up moderate mountains. And yeah, it's totally different when you kind of get specific with it, and also
right,
map out goals and things like taking a week to deload. It's not always up
right,
and up. It's actually about
right,
giving your body a chance to assume some of the gains you've been working on. So for me, it was super eye opening in that sense. Yeah, picking a few exercises and working on that and seeing progress week by week, month by month. But I was doing it basically with weights, so not as much machine. Like down where I'm at, there's actually not that many well equipped gyms, so it was actually
right.
all about using water jugs and free weights I got at home and stuff like that. But yeah, trying to complement that
And I,
with my guiding work in zone one a lot of the time.
and I think one of the cruxes of Ultar specifically is that, pretty much all of the hard technical climbing is at the top of the mountain. So it wasn't just like we needed to get through some hard climbing low down and then it was just this big endurance push to the summit. We had to do the big endurance push over multiple days up to almost 7,000 meters. And then we had to be, still
Fresh
feeling good
enough.
enough to do
Yeah,
the steep mix climbing at altitude.
right,
So I think
right,
that was big on this objective of really honing that in, because it wasn't just, you know, pushing through it, it was pushing through it and then doing the hard part.
right, right. Yeah, so you're having, yeah, the two factors, two of the bigger factors. There's many factors working against you, but you had the cumulative days prior to getting to the difficulty, which you guys were saying were 600 meter. Some of these days were 600 meter ascent days
I
and
think they were
snow and
all
ice.
bigger than
Well,
that. Yeah.
if we started at 41 and we
Yeah.
climbed to around 67, 50, that's when it kind of started getting steep. And we did that over 3 days. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, 2,600 meters over 3 days of
Yeah.
mostly front pointing and on the tools. And
Right.
kind of obligatory terrain as well, because um, not often would you find a sheltered bivvy where you wanted to stop. So that's kind of what we figured out as well last year. It was like, cool, we can climb from uh yeah, 4100 or to 51 or 43 to 51, I can't remember, but there's a good perch here that's protected and sheltered, and then from
Right.
51 we're going to 59, and there's our next perch, and then from there we're going to 67. And there's no real like, oh, we should call it a day early or just stop
Right.
here option. It's just like steep ice slopes in between, and you want to get up them and to your next biv. So yeah, it was on
these camps. You're chopping out the ledge. You're putting the tent up, right? There.
our first 3 camps. First one we kind of put on this snow spine, so it was really nice because it was completely safe from sort of the gullies and faces around you. Things were getting really warm, so another thing we figured out last year is that we basically wanted to climb at nighttime on the lower half of the mountain, and we would start like inverting our schedule to more of a daytime schedule the higher we got on the mountain, because it would get colder because of the elevation. But yeah, our second camp was at this kind of halfway point on the pillar, relatively flat, kind of in a crevasse. And then our third camp was on the last bit of the snow spine before you get into the mixed terrain. So the first 3 bivvies were platforms that we could dig kind of into crevasses or onto this snow fin. And then from there, we were kind of in these hanging bivvies using a snow hammock that Martin designed. But yeah, that from there, the pace slowed down. We went from doing like big, like I said, 600 to 800 meter days to making 200 to 300 meters gain a day, partly because of the weather and conditions, partly because of the technical difficulty, and partly because we had to chop these bivvies, into steep ice slopes and try and fill out the hammock enough that we could kind of mangle our tent into it and squeeze in there.
Right. So the hammock basically is attached to the wall piece of fabric that catches the material that you're removing from the slope and eventually makes something that's kind of flat, or certainly something that extends horizontally from an otherwise steep face. They're enabling you to put a tent on. Is that correct?
Oh, it's a shame that Martin's not here because he could totally spray you down on like the individual fibers that were in that thing. He's so into it. But basically it's a Dyneema.
Thank God he's not.
From Ethan and I's perspective, it's basically a big sheeted Dyneema that has like a bunch of little loops sewn into it by the fish. And so we're kind of like chopping a 40-centimeter ledge into the mountain, or as much as we can. And then from there, a bunch of ice screws into the sort of downslope edge. And then you're trying to fill this Dyneema hammock with whatever ice and snow you can scrape off the face and turn the ledge you've chopped plus the hammock into something wide enough that fits the tent. And we got a couple of photos. You can see that it's not quite wide enough, but it was enough to basically, just like squeeze the tent in there. And then
got it.
I mean, our bivvy system, I think, was something we refined and really helped us too. We worked a bunch with grade 7. Our buddy Nathan helped us design a sleeping bag for the first attempt, and this year we kind of improved on it. But basically, we were taking a 2-man North Face tent, 2 thermarests inside that we would kind of like lash together, and then 1 sleeping bag that the 3 of us would share. So it just had a double layer of synthetic insulation on the top, nothing on the bottom, and we would just wear all of our clothes. So our whole bivvy system, I want to say, weighed maybe 4 or 4.5 kilos, including tent pad, sleeping bag, maybe 5. But that was kind of also a crucial element of our strategy and doing the 2 trips and figuring all this stuff out.
Well, important question: who got the middle of the sleeping bag?
Of course, it was Martin. he's like 9 foot tall or something ridiculous. Like Ethan and I are dwarfs next to this guy, so he kind of had to be there anyway. But I think the middle guy, like, sure, you have to deal with 2 guys rolling around, but you're also the warmest because you're between 2 people, so it's got its pros and cons. You're also sleeping in the gap of the pads, which is not that sweet. But by the time you do 2 trips with this kind of bivvy system, we had like a fully coordinated spoon system. Like one guy would start rolling, and then everyone has to roll.
Beautiful.
It was no big deal. Yeah, orchestrated.
And you realize like in these situations that the best skill you can train for alpinism is your ability to fall asleep on demand when needed. Because Martin would literally lie down and he would be asleep every night within 5 minutes, and I'd be up just like tossing and turning for hours on end.
Champion, champion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is yeah. So the feature to the mountain, lots of snow and ice climbing, relatively lower angle before we're getting to steep technical mixed climbing, essentially towards the top. How many once you can after the steep technical mixed climbing, what is the terrain to the summit on y'all's route specifically?
Yeah, well, we had kind of thought that the steep climbing would be from around 6,500 to 6,900 meters, and it
Okay.
turned out that it was around like 67 to 7,200 meters. So it
Oh,
was
wow.
longer than we thought, and it also went a lot higher. And so it kind of just kept going. Like on our sixth morning on the mountain, we woke up at 10 p.m. and started moving at midnight for the summit. So we like left everything at our high camp, and I led like one last pitch of mixed climbing um like in the middle of the night that night, which put us on the summit slopes around like 7250 or 72 or something like that. And from there, it was literally just only the last 150 meters was like relatively straightforward snow climbing on the whole thing. So that definitely like kept us going a lot longer than we thought. And
Mm,
it really just turned out that there wasn't very much like quote unquote easy terrain. It was all pretty engaging, real climbing,
mm,
using your tools. And then we reached the summit plateau and had to walk really far. So it actually was like, oh, actually we just have to keep walking because the summit wasn't actually at the top of the pillar, which is often the case. You like crest the top and you're like, oh, there's another like half an hour to like walk this glacier across to the small bump of snow.
right,
Or
right.
I say half an hour, maybe half an hour at sea level, maybe 3 hours
Right.
at 7,300 meters.
Yeah, there are moments to the summit. You guys were moving quite slowly, right?
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it was
I
weird.
would
The upper mountain also had its own weather cycle. It was almost like that we did these first three huge enduro days, and then we got into the upper reaches. And it was funny because we'd always seen this upper part of the mountain kind of shrouded in cloud. And then once we were there, we kind of understood that every day it sort of overdeveloped by 11 a.m. midday, and basically started howling wind and snowing and spin drifting and everything else. So navigation and even climbing like after midday most days wasn't actually that feasible. So
Mm,
we ended up on a bit of a timetable up high where we kind of get going, like Ethan said, by midnight, 2 a.m. Um, and because you kind of need a bit of daylight to navigate the mixed terrain, and then we'd basically be shut down by 11 a.m. midday. So that's also why we had these like shorter bumps of distance higher on the mountain. We were just kind of confined to this like early morning sort of little brief weather window before it overdeveloped basically every day when we were on the upper mountain.
How
So
did you guys deal with that in terms of your the mental? Like, is that a surprise to you? You said you saw clouds up there, but were you surprised and were you guys like toiling with that, or was it an acceptance thing? What was up?
I think the cool thing about our team is that we were just all pretty calm about our scene. It was interesting as well because you knew there was a weather window in the range in general, like around where we were, and like I said before, we got into those upper reaches, you could see all the way to Nanga Parbat kind of thing. Um,
Mm,
but um, at the same time, yeah, sure, it's serious when it starts howling and um, there's less communication and stuff like that. Um, Yeah, I think the hardest challenge with the weather was probably our summit day, descending from the summit, because we decided to descend all the way to our third camp back at 67, so kind of get past all that mixed technical terrain. And I really came in that day and made navigation super tricky. We were kind of blind there for a while and trying to figure out where we were on the pillar, and eventually got to our bivvy and spent a good chunk of time kind of pinned there, just in howling weather. But yeah, we were also just kind of at the apex of this ridge and feeling the worst of it. So sort of getting buried in the crevasse that we dug into. So we just periodically kind of get out and dig out. And I think that was maybe the most trying time mentally for us. We'd been out for 6 days. We spent that night there too. So we woke up on the seventh day and we were still shoveling ourselves out of the crevasse. Still quite high on the mountain. But yeah, our team works well in that way. We kind of balance each other out, and we'd taken an extra can of gas. We had a couple extra meals. We were prepared to hang, and that's what we did. We waited till the following day. Yeah, was only on the seventh day that we could actually continue descending. So yeah, things definitely take on a more serious nature. It's crazy. I mean, you look down the valley and you're 5,000 meters above like the lights in town, and it's very obvious that you're a long ways out. And yeah, there's a certain point where I was just like, we're like closer to the top than we are to the ground, or yeah, you just feel like you're way up there.
Right. Obviously, aerobic training, aerobic capacity, as we all know, I've said a million times, is sort of the base of what's fueling the the efforts low down on the mountain, high up. Muscular endurance, it's the fatigue resistance enhancer. That this period, these workouts, it's a big piece of what's enabling you guys to do this day after day is your muscular endurance, the local fatigue resistance in your legs and stuff. But so those are controllable, trainable, and but how did you all guys train for this situation, or day 7 of an alpine climb, or um the other aspects of the mental and physical, if you did do any sort of intentional training leading up to the trip?
I feel
It's
like,
just
sorry, you go.
yeah, I think just building experience over the years, like working up to this. Like when I think about Martin and my history of just like doing all this climbing together in very remote places, and also climbing a lot in the Canadian Rockies, which is often very cold and wild, and you really feel out there. It can feel quite Himalayan on some of the big peaks in the Rockies, and I'm sure Seba can attest in Patagonia is a similar thing. But I think something that felt cool and a little bit different in a positive way on this trip is, I think, one off, having already been to the mountain, I think we had an added level of confidence from the year prior. And I think just kind of like the collective mentality was super important for us on such a big thing. Like as Seba said, like, and someone asked me the other day, they're like, "Oh, was there any points that you were like worried about things, or thinking about descending?" And I was kind of like, "No, we just had this." I think the three of us all just had this confidence as we were climbing up that permeated through the team, and that there was never any question. It was never, "Oh, it's clouding over, it's the weather is breaking down in the afternoon." Like we still knew that we had this high pressure, of course, but we weren't like, "Oh, what does that mean?" We were just kind of like, "Okay, how do we deal with this?" kind of thing, and kept dealing. And so I think as well that was the case on the descent, because I think that Martin and I were maybe starting to feel a bit more anxiety as we were pinned a little bit in this crevasse at 6,700, and Seba was very much still just like, "You know what, we're gonna try again, and we're gonna get through it." And so I think having that kind of a mentality is really important, and yeah, just like relying on your partners and trusting them.
I think for me, it's also really good to lean into the guiding background. And that's kind of when I got into the career too, because you learn a lot about the way mountains behave and the way you need to do things to be in them. And it does leave you with a bit of tranquility to know, like I can do this. Like I've been on big mountains, we've been up here, we know how to do all these small tasks. And once you start combining all the small tasks, you do big things, but you're never thinking about, we're not starting up day one thinking about like, oh yeah, it's going to be great in 5 days when we're on the summit slopes. It's just like, you're just doing the thing that you have to do right now to move this process further down the line, and the three of us were all in that headspace. It was like, okay, right now we need to melt water. Right now I need to dig a ledge. Right now I need to leave this pitch. Right now
Right.
I need to pull up the rope as quick as I can. Right now I need to eat a bar, and it was kind of the biggest trip getting back to base camp after 10 days and just being like, for me, it was like, wow, I don't have to do anything right now. I've been constantly thinking about what's the best thing I can do right now for this collective effort. And I was
Right.
like, wow, finally I don't have to do anything. We're back.
And I think it's important to also mention the art of bailing. And I think the more time that you spend trying to climb difficult mountains, the more time you spend failing. And once you kind of gain the confidence of retreat, things feel a lot less intense. Like I remember being on the south face of Logan on one of those early expeditions and getting caught in like quite a bad storm and having a really terrible uh butt ledge bivy. And then the next day being like really stressed out about how we're going to get off the mountain, and we just kind of made it down without any issues quite quickly and was like, huh, okay, that was all right. And I think
Right.
once you spend a lot of time doing that, you kind of gain confidence that no matter how bad it's going to get, like always in the back of your mind, you're like, I know how to get off this mountain. And that's knowing that is obviously really important and mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to
Yeah.
spend time in that mental space of like, okay, maybe even the thought comes to your mind of like, oh, the weather's really bad right now, like it could trap us here or whatever. But being able to really pick that apart internally and be like, what would actually trap us here? Like, even if we don't have amazing weather, I'm still going to be able to drill a V thread right here. And that's going to put me 60 meters lower. And then I'm going to do it again and again and again. And what's the tangible reason that would stop me? And maybe there is a tangible reason sometimes. And we did wait a while. We were like, visibility is not great. We still have margin to wait. Let's see if it clears in the morning. We're kind of bivvied on the eastern side of the pillar at this point. So my thought was kind of like, this face is going to get really warm in the morning at first light. That's going to create kind of updraft as the face warms, and hopefully he's going to pull this cloud above us, and that's kind of what happened. We got a window of clarity and went for it. But yeah, for me, it's just about like trying to not leave the emotions fully aside, but be practical and think like, what does this situation look like? Are we prepared for it? And yeah, in this case, we did, I think we did carry a bunch of extra stuff to kind of keep our margins good, and yeah, I think yeah, being able to lean into each other too, and the collective strength is super important.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the margin as well because I think when we were packing, I was kind of pushing to bring a little bit less gas and food. And I think we had even summited with a couple cans of gas and a few freeze-dried meals that we brought all the way up to the summit and then subsequently back down, or at least to the high camp.
So high camp,
And
yeah.
so it kind of felt for a moment like, hey, we brought too much. And then we're sitting waiting this weather out on the way down. And it was actually like, hey, we're actually pretty stoked that we still have food and gas because you know what? If we need to wait here another day or two, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't eat any of the freeze dried on the last 3 days of the mountain, but
That too.
I guess you could call it training weight.
Well, six weeks before you guys left, we had a discussion on the phone, and I think y'all had previously been doing these gym-based muscular endurance workouts. And for the listener, these are same exercises that are listed like on our website. For example, these are split squat jumps, jumping. We're targeting local muscular endurance, which means these guys are doing these workouts, and they're during the workout, the legs are feeling like the limitation, the legs are burning, but global fatigue impact of these workouts is not is something, but it's definitely not as significant as they had they gone out to do, multi-hour, heavy pack carry, like limit cardiovascular limit leg thing. So just to call this out, what these guys were doing. From my perspective as a coach, I was um, I knew that these guys were going out and doing days in the mountains for keeping skills sharp for climbing, or for the weather windows training for just systems. So there's some incidental muscular endurance, as I call it, from hiking up and down these approaches. I mean, these guys, again, were in Canada or Patagonia, where they're not riding lifts to the mountains. They're often doing hundreds and hundreds of meters of ascent. So my intention was to have another, because I knew that muscular endurance was going to be quite a significant challenge on this mountain. Like we're talking about how we have tons of lower angle leg challenging terrain before we're getting to the slow ticky tacky mixed climbing, which is still muscularly challenging, but it's definitely not as you're definitely not moving as fast. The recruitment pattern is different in the legs, but certainly one needs to be resistant to fatigue to physically get up this technical steep stuff, but also just cognitively, mentally not to be smashed, which would perhaps inhibit you from climbing it, but certainly create another mental challenge to climbing technical stuff so high, which is a challenge in and of itself. Um, but then we moved from this gym-based muscular endurance to essentially dropping that gym workout almost entirely. And we were, I think I had spoke to you guys in the 6 weeks ago saying, try to do some. I think everyone was in Canada at this point. Try to do some of these, essentially multiple days of alpine climbing, or okay, if you do one day climbing up on in the Icefields Parkway, relatively easy access alpine climbing area in Canada, a day of climbing there, and the next day some trail running, or some sort of combination. So in that 6 week period, you two, did you do, could you talk about some of the perverse and contrived things that you did that were aimed at um, the hidden pillar, training for the hidden pillar?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I just want to say that those muscular endurance gym workouts were a gem, and I had never done anything like that. And I think if there was anything that I was going to do gym-based for structured training for the next trip, at the minimum, it's going to be that. And it even got to the point where
Nice.
we even got Martin on board, which was a huge win because
Wow.
Martin is just a machine, and he tends to keep his gears greased by drinking beers on the patio of Neckshaw between climbs and guiding outings. So it was
I wish I could. Wow.
it was cool to get him on board too. I'm usually, no matter what, just trying to keep up with him is my baseline. And so having done that, I think some of the things that we did, the classic, like putting as many big rocks as you can in your backpack and slogging 1,000 meters up the local hills of Lady McDonald and Hulling and Canmore. We were doing some kind of like, on the cooler end, we were doing some link ups, like climbing some classic ice routes like Murchison Falls, which is like a 3 pitch water ice four, and then continuing on to the summit of the mountain, which is like another 1,000 meters above there,
Cool.
which is kind of like a cool little link up. So yeah, I think one of the hard parts about the Rockies is that conditions are quite difficult to come by for alpine climbing. So you're kind of, even in the spring as things are settling, you're still kind of waiting for weather and conditions to come in. So you're going for those things when you can and going up the ice fields when you can, and otherwise you're just kind of putting some water in the backpack, putting some rocks in the pack, and yeah, hitting the local trails. And yeah,
You
I
can
think
kind of
that
like
was
couple things though, like
yeah.
do a morning at a steep ice crag and kind of climb 8 pitches on the tools and get really pumped, and then do a Lady Mac heavy backpack lap in the afternoon. Like, yeah, I think more than doing huge alpine days, which we did when the conditions were in, was also just about hitting all those little objectives within a day and within a week, whichever way you
Right.
can, kind of thing. Like, if you can't climb a big mountain, big technical mountain, do a little technical climbing and then climb a low angle but maybe technically easy mountain, or
Right.
I also found that this might be cheating, Seth. This might not be cool, but I use the treadmill a lot by the end, because found that the impact of doing thousands of meters of elevation up and down is really good, obviously, especially on the uphill, but on the downhill it's kind of tough. So I was also, I was doing, thousands of meters of elevation with a heavy pack by the end of the program, I think, but maybe half of that was in the mountains, and a lot of it was on a treadmill with like a heavy pack, and you take 3 steps and you're off the thing, so your knees kind of appreciate that. And then I'd go out and do a bunch of technical climbing, and try and like, yeah, be efficient in that way, coupling things together, and or hitting the gym and doing the muscle endurance, which, same as Ethan, I found was really fundamental part of the training for me, was turning that like base period and strength with the sort of machine work and free weights work into endurance.
Right.
And super surprising, kind of short workouts where you're like, I'm doing this exercise for 30 seconds
Right.
until I'm like gassed. Like, how does this correlate with huge alpine climbs in the Karakoram? But you can feel it, physiologically, that you are building this endurance, that then when you go out and do a heavyweight carry and started doing these bigger alpine days, the recovery is great, and you can keep kind of doing day after day, or minute by minute, hour by hour. Yeah, I feel like the muscular endurance was also super helpful for me.
All right. The treadmill is an incredible tool.
A Stairmaster is what I meant to say, not a treadmill.
It's same machine moving under you,
Yeah,
steep, whatever it is. Stair machine,
Stairmaster was
treadmill,
my best friend. Yeah,
your best
and
friend.
you can like watch a movie while you do it, so it's not like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And have and your snack buffet if you wish, and
yeah, it's kind of
thing.
really practical and effective. I think
And
it's
you
good to do some downhill too, of course, but
Rumor has it we got back from Ultar and Seba was on the treadmill the next day.
it's not true. Don't believe that.
reacquainting with his best friend.
Yeah, missed his best friend.
I was glad not to be in the lineup for the Stairmaster at the local gym.
He's not cheating. You explained why it's a good thing. So I just will reiterate it, that a lot like the muscular endurance, it gets to the point. It is the physiological target. If you somehow were going to go climb Ultar Star with these 2 other guys and had no alpine climbing experience, like they were just, committing expedition suicide by inviting you along in that circumstance, then it would not be advised to avoid the mountains. You would want to accrue decades of experience in a matter of months. However, you have however many years plus of all your guiding, where you are walking up and downhill plenty, um, that also you have the physiological ability, but also you know how to do it. You have the skills. And I think obviously descending Ultar Sar, there was some walking downhill, but there was probably a lot of rappelling too. You guys probably didn't simul down climb the whole mountain, right? So you did a lot of wraps too. So descent endurance, descent ability is important, but it's a trumped by other factors. But
I
I have a
think
lot of
it's like an analysis of where you have the most to gain, if that makes
that's
sense.
it.
And I think the three of us
What are your
felt like,
weaknesses? Yeah.
cool, there's technical terrain on this rig. There's some ice pitches and some mixed climbing, but I think we all felt like where we have the most performance to gain was being able to do these huge enduro days to get to the mixed climbing, um,
Mm-hmm.
ideally in the best shape as we could, you know. And so that's why our focus was really on the muscular endurance in the legs, cardio. Well, obviously still on the tools, still trying to stay fit, still trying to be strong in the upper body. Like, yeah, it is worth mentioning that half the program was still about maintaining that, but I think all of
Mm-hmm.
us came away like, you really can't have too much leg strength for this objective. Like, we need to be able to stay on the front points, yeah, for 6 days, and kind of just hang on. Um,
Hang on.
and maybe the technical terrain uh isn't going to be the well, like, or like going and dry tooling isn't really where we're going to see the most gains for the way what we're trying to do here, you know.
It is really about knowing your objective and knowing the physiological demands of it, and then taking looks back at yourself as athletes or people, and you know, how can we ensure give ourselves 120% on that, or can we catch up to 100% of meeting this objective? So I think it's really important to look at this as it's not just we're going to just follow some rote program and do all this sort of groups of workouts and it's all good and it'll probably help, but having deeper layers of specificity to training is
Yeah, and
really
we are all
important.
different within the team too, right? Like, Ethan works a totally different kind of job to Martin and I. So again, we all had different, I think, needs in terms of what was going to give us the best bang for our buck within our life schedule, and yeah, within our like individual fitness, you know. Um, yeah, I think Martin and I
Right,
both spent hours and hours every week in zone one carrying heavy packs anyway. So sometimes it was more
right.
about really doing those muscular endurance workouts, whereas Ethan seems super psyched on, you know, he's doing multiple thousands, like a couple thousand meters a day with a heavy pack and really working on getting that like zone one aerobic fitness, which
Yeah,
maybe
the base.
Martin and I kind of have inadvertently through work. So yeah, it is super
Sure.
individual,
Yeah,
um, person to person, and then obviously considering the objective.
right. What improvement aspects briefly, you guys, like what came up as being something you would do differently for a similar expedition or similar altitude or whatever?
I think, I mean, I don't know what the improvement is yet, but I think one of the cruxes for all of us, probably me a little bit more than the other guys, was nutrition and bringing the right food to eat at altitude, which is very cruxy. And I think we all, as Seba said, we just essentially weren't eating any of the dinners that we brought by the last few days of the
Mm,
trip, just having a couple bars every day, and that was it. And I had a lot of nausea and kind of like gut unhappiness while we were climbing, and so I think figuring out the way to keep your stomach happy and to keep refueling at altitude is one of the big things that we're going to improve on for the next round.
Yeah.
what were you guys mostly eating?
So in the morning we had a 3 Nalgene system. It was a Nalgene coffee just to get rid of the grumpiness and get us going, and then we had to have another Nalgene with some carb powder in it, and then a third with a protein mix. Because we basically found that liquids would go down all right. You're already pretty thirsty anyway, so we could kind of sip away at those. So we all kind of had like 2/3 of a liter of liquid between that, or whatever, maybe a liter if we drank enough coffee, which by the third day we weren't even drinking the coffee. And then basically trying to chew down a couple bars a day, but it's tough.
Yeah, and then we would share two freeze-dried dinners amongst the three of us.
Yeah, on the lower half of the mountain that was happening, but that stopped happening at 6,700.
And there was nausea going on.
I think Ethan struggling a bit with nausea. We were all right. There's just no appetite. It's just, yeah, it's hard to explain, but you're just not really hungry.
Right.
Or the thought of eating, I think physiologically your body's like, that's just maybe there's like an internal thing where it's like that's way too much effort. Like that's trying to chug down a freeze dried and digest that right now is not it's not it's not an option. So
Previous expedition. Go
it's
ahead.
almost like your appetite is guided by your body just being like, nope, we can't do that right now. But a carb drink goes down quite well. Or I think there's definitely improvement to be made there. Like it was funny, we took a bunch of ramen up, and it was almost like the salty soup of the ramen was our favorite thing. And when you looked at all the stuff we brought, it was like maybe the most nutrient poor and calorie poor element. But one, in terms of like the mental aspect of just having something warm and getting something into you is really important too for morale. And yeah, it was kind of the thing that we ate the entire time, kind of up and down the mountain, was just this like salty broth with a few noodles in it that for sure don't give you much nutritionally, but it's something, and you're getting something back. But the super calorie dense pad thai or whatever you brought up there is like, yeah, it's staying in the bottom of the pack basically.
Mm. Yeah. Were the temperatures a factor, do you feel, for the nutrition or for the appetite at any point, or do you think it was mainly the altitude?
I think it was the altitude. I'd say overall, like heat was more of a problem on this mountain than cold, just because it was south facing and Pakistani summer has a pretty strong sun effect.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it was just more the altitude overall, which is crazy because you're just expending so much energy day after day. And then the idea that you're like not hungry is just, as Seba said, it's just kind of strange and counterintuitive. And I think maybe that's what separates kind of high altitude alpinism from other endurance outings is just like, I don't know, the normal way that you'd think about nutrition lower down just in a way goes out the window. And I think my the mindset I'm going to take next time is literally just like bringing what is something that my body will accept, not thinking about its nutritional value at all. What can I actually put in my body that it will accept?
Or right, looking at totally different because when at home you're saying this has this and this macro, this and many calories, whatever. But up there, it's almost like more calories, not as good. Okay, it's like just need that liquid salt essentially. Yeah.
I think my favorite thing that you said to us, Seth, was to eat lots of ice cream before we left. And all
Oh
jokes aside,
yes.
I think, yeah, putting on a bunch of weight before the climb is really important too. We
Mm.
kind of had this running joke that we're on the Don Willens diet because everyone's got some quote where they interview him at an expedition and he rolls up kind of looking overweight, and all of his partners are like these skinny looking, fibrous alpine dudes, and they ask him like, "Aren't you worried about your state of fitness or whatever?" And he's like, "Well, by the end of this trip, I'm gonna look like them, and they'll be dead." And so we basically just ate as much food as we could before the trip too, and in between, like between our acclimatization round and our climb on Ultar, we also just came to town, and you really got to stack it on. And I mean, yeah, because you don't have an
Yeah.
appetite up there, so you are, I think, working into your fat stores basically, and muscle too for sure.
Yeah,
Right.
a pint of ice cream a night was definitely part of the pre-departure plan.
That's approved, highly approved. Yeah, it's a different sport, Ethan. You said it well, and it is. Well, the demands are incredibly different. This is where highly fat adapted athletes, people, definitely can you know have an advantage, and having an excellent base camp. And you guys had the legendary cook there, and I bet some of those meals were pretty nice. Um, so um, yeah, I think this is a reality that makes these sorts of alpine climbs um, even more noteworthy. Is with all due respect, ultra runs and big huge runs around, or low elevation efforts are obviously incredibly impressive, and people are moving quickly, and you can still be suffering as much as you guys are up there. But when you factor in, you know, intaking 800 calories a day for the individual and out there working so hard, it's you call it what it is, whatever you want. But for me, it's impressive and distinguishes it a bit. Not so much in a vertical way, but it's certainly in like it's different, you know.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
cool. It's cool to
it
go
was
up.
also interesting to see um, how our strategy changed as we were on the route, in the sense that you're kind of going alpine style, every rope, a rack, and a pack on your back, and so you're kind of leveraging everything to try and get up and down as quickly as you can, but going as fast as you can is not always the best strategy for getting to the summit. And we on the upper pillar, we made a conscious decision to go a day to take an extra day on the way up, so that we were climbing the upper pillar not in one day but in 2 days. And I think that was like a huge part of why we were successful on this trip, because we actually really slowed things down. And I
Mm.
think the day before we summited, we only climbed like 100 or 150 meters vertical. And we like set up our bivy as high as we could, like went to sleep as early as we could. And just like, I think that taking that extra time sometimes in this game is actually like advantageous. Um, and I think you see that a lot these days, where everyone wants to do everything in a day, and even in the Rockies and on other big alpine routes. And I think it's as nice as it is to climb with a light pack. I think that there is definitely a place to be carrying bivy kit, and still bivvying on things and taking a little bit longer in terms of just like the the chance of success, and how it can actually help a lot.
Did you have weather knowledge, live weather knowledge when you were on the mountain?
Yeah, our friend Alec giving us weather updates every day, and we had joke he's great at he's good at the job. He's done his time. He's climbed a few things in his life, um,
Mr.
and so we
Bird.
were joking that he would every forecast he would send us, he would say that there's an insignificant amount of precip coming. And
Yeah.
Alex, one of those people that insignificant can mean many different things. So it was kind of funny. And when I saw him and when we got down, I joked with him. I was like, thanks for giving us all the insignificant forecast, because it's probably why we kept going upwards.
Turns out Alex's choice of wording was key to the expedition's success.
You could say
So
that for sure.
my point in asking that, it's in some ways it's like it's not the thing, but it's definitely a thing for slowing down. Right, knowing you, or perhaps it was. I don't want to speak for you guys, but I can imagine seeing at least 24 hours ahead of you. There's insignificant precept saying, we don't there's not a um weather is not pushing us one way or another, right?
Correct. We had a
Is
margin within which we could be flexible. It wasn't. If we had have only had one day, we would have had to keep going. But within the set of circumstances we had, didn't make sense to. Was storming. We had no viz. Um, we had no sort of knowledge of where we could get our final biv, and seemed like the steep terrain was going to keep coming. So, yeah, you're right. We had the weather, and it was like makes more sense to hunker down here and tomorrow go for a final push than probably go today and get benighted, and then this becomes a larger undertaking.
I'm glad you all made it back down and in mostly one piece. So it's a new route. The or it you climbed a feature that hadn't been previously climbed. Did you give it a unique name? And
we called it Shooting the Moon, which is a play a play you can do in a card game that we played a lot in base camp in Hearts. But basically, there's a certain point within the game that you realize you kind of not you've maybe got quite a bad hand, and um, you can sort of halfway through realize that you're not going to pull it off, and maybe you can tip all the factors in your favor and kind of go for this sort of Hail Mary play. Um, which when
Nice.
you pull it off, it's pretty good because you win that hand and you give your partners a whole bunch of points, which is the opposite of what you want. Um, but basically, that's what it felt like to climb this thing. 2 years of effort and um, so many factors, some of which we've talked about today and some of which we haven't. But um, we're also climbing under a full moon during that weather window, and um,
Nice.
it just made sense. It felt like shooting the moon. It felt like all these crazy factors kind of all folded in our favor, and everything just aligned really, really well in this amazing 8-day journey up and down from base camp to base camp. So that's the name.
That's the name. It was just a big card game with a bunch of factors.
Yeah, big house of
Pretty
cards.
much.
Tassar.
Yeah. Well, great. Thanks for chatting with me and everyone else who's going to listen to this. Um, we really, really appreciate it, and congratulations.
Oh, thanks for all the help with training. For me, it made huge, huge difference, and definitely did for all of us, I think. So kudos to you for all of your help.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Next
Thanks,
time.
Seth. Yeah, definitely made a huge difference for us this year. And as we've talked about, you got to stack all the odds in your favor.
That's it.
As soon as this
You
call ends,
really,
we'll put together another plan for next year.
yeah.
Hit the
Yeah,
Stairmaster.
yeah, sure. I'll be happy to apply the pain.
Really, it's
So.
just 11 a.m. and I'm gonna go take that pint of Ben and Jerry's out of the freezer.
Hell yeah. Right. Well, enjoy. Thanks a lot, guys, for the chat, and have a great rest of your day. I appreciate it. And cheers, Martin. I know you would have added to this had you been here, but you were here in spirit, the fish. And thanks. Appreciate it.
Right
Thanks,
on.
Seth.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I also just wanted to give a shout out to the grants that help support this trip. The American Alpine Club Cutting Edge Award, the John Laughlin Memorial Award, and the Mazama's Bob Wilson Expedition Grant. We're all super helpful in making this thing happen and are great opportunities if you are looking to go climbing in the mountains.